Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I'm also the host of Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight, and I'm the editor of the anthology, which you should run out and buy, called Moms Don't Have Time to, a Quarantine Anthology. All proceeds of that book go to COVID-19 vaccine research. And I'm the editor-in-chief of Moms Don't Have Time to Write, a new publication on Medium, and we're accepting submissions, so please send your personal essays there. And if all that isn't enough, you can follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens, and my website is zibbyowens.com. Okay, now back to this amazing podcast. Cate Doty is the author of Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Know About Love I Learned on the Wedding Pages. She is a writer and former editor at the New York Times, where she covered the news of food, weddings, business, New York, and more. Her work has appeared in the Times, Southern Living, Our State, and other publications. A graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, she lives in Raleigh, North Carolina with her family. Welcome, Cate. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss mergers and acquisitions.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I have been looking forward to this book for so long. When I first saw the cover image and the topic, I was like, I cannot wait for this. As someone who tried to get in the Vows column at one point in my life, successfully, I might add. I just and who read it religiously, by the way, for years and years and years. I just couldn't wait to talk to you. So anyway, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I've heard several stories kind of like that, like people who just read them religiously and, for entertainment or because they see their friends or just like a combination of the two or just like a bit of hubris or schadenfreude or whatever. So for whatever reason, you read them.
You know what? And then I want to go back so you can explain why we're even discussing this. Well, first of all, okay. Tell everybody what this book is about, and then I'll go back into my own thoughts about it.
Okay. Well, this book is overarchingly about our obsession with romantic love. But what literally it's about is when I came to the New York Times, to New York, when I was about 24, the job that they threw me into was writing the wedding announcements. And I have been obsessed with weddings since I was about 5 years old, as the book details. I mean, right up to trying on my mother's wedding dress or basically stealing my new step grandmother's wedding bouquet, when I was 5 years old.
That picture was priceless, by the way.
My cousin Mary Margaret does not know that's in the book.
Uh-oh.
So we'll see.
Okay. I won't tell anyone.
Anyway, and so I've just always been obsessed with weddings. And when I landed at the Times writing the wedding announcements, I thought, well, this is like a match made in heaven for me because obviously I love writing. I was there to be a writer and I love weddings. So it was a great way to mesh the two. But I also I'm not from small town North Carolina, but I'm from the South where wedding announcements are very important, but they're not the New York Times wedding announcements. They're not these vaunted, they're not the things that people think about what's going to be on my headstone. I got married, I was in the New York Times and I did whatever. And so it was I had sort of a steep learning curve. And it was a great way to learn about a certain part of not just New York, but how the country feels about weddings. And then beyond that, it sort of opened my eyes to how people think about commitment. And so, at the beginning, I was learning about weddings in New York and sort of getting my feet wet in the city in a place that I loved and wanted to be in so badly. But then I really started thinking about, what people think about weddings and commitment and why we commit and why we get married in the first place. And in the middle of all this, I had started to date the man who eventually became my husband. And we both had major anxiety about getting married and major apprehension about it for various reasons. And so it's about all of these things. So it's my memoir of writing the Times announcements, meeting all these people, talking to these people who I would never have talked to otherwise, learning cool things about them, but also understanding why they decided that marriage, to quote Anna, was the next right thing. To make that final leap or whatever. So that's why we're here.
Wow. Amazing. I loved, of course, all the stuff about the wedding stuff and column and everything, but I really loved your own relationship, especially your obsession with Adnan. Is that how you pronounce it?
Adnan. Yes. That's not his real name, but yes.
Okay. All right. Whatever his name really was. Because I feel like you were so open about just how hooked you were. I feel like you said it, in fact, straight out, I was hooked. I was totally in it. It was hot. It was amazing. And I feel like a lot of people don't write about those relationships where you're just so in it and you can't even explain why. And yet it's all you think about. And anyway, you just captured that so well. I found myself like not knowing whether I wanted you guys to get together or if I wanted you to stay away. And like when you hooked up before your trip, I was like, no, she went there. But then I was like, I don't know, maybe it will work when she moves to New York. And I don't know, you just like had me along for the ride.
Didn't work even a little bit. Not a little bit at all. But I think it's so important to embrace those relationships that we have, you know? I mean, whether we decide to commit and then like decide that's not what we want, or it's so important to talk about those parts of our lives. I mean, they become building blocks of who we are, and they're like parts, or help me, they're pins on a map of where we want to go. So, you know, I had this, I mean, it was amazing, I have to say, with Adnan. Adnan, he's still a friend.
Is he? I was wondering what the status was there. Yeah.
Yes, he's still a friend. He knows about the book. You know, we've talked about it, and you know, it is what it is. But you know, I still count him as like, you know, part of my heart, because we had such this weird but great but terrible but fraught but kind of great and hot relationship all at once. Like, we were young together. We helped each other through that part of our lives. You know, like post college, trying to figure out what you want. And, you know, we also like, I can't speak for him, but like I learned a huge amount from that relationship about what I wanted, what I didn't want, how to get out of something that was not really working. Although frankly, like, you know, he basically pulled the plug, but it was good. Like, he was the one who was like, this is not working, you know, this is the end. And because otherwise I don't think that I would have just gone along for the ride, but it was helpful to have that person say like, this is not what I want. And that by proxy helped me figure out what it is I wanted. And it turns out what I want still is like 3 rooms down the hall teaching a class on Zoom. So, and we just had our 11th anniversary on Saturday.
Yes, I saw you posted about it. It was so cute.
Yeah. We got away.
Good for you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yes, I love seeing that. And how does he feel about this book? So you have the odd, not everybody knows that it's coming out. Like, how does he feel? How does he feel reading about how like sexual a relationship you had with somebody else?
He was so that, you know, oddly enough, my mom asked me the same question. I was like, I'm not going to talk about that with you because you're my mother. It was, so he refused. He's a real traditionalist about books, and he refused to read most of it until the hard copies arrived, which was like 10 days ago, I think, or something like that. So we unboxed the books, and he went and sat on the couch and like took the day off from work the next day to read this book, like straight through.
Wow.
Which was so sweet and so adorable. And he had read parts of it, he'd read the parts of the book that told the stories of our lives that we were both involved in, not for fact-checking purposes, just for me to make sure that like he's okay with me telling this part of the story from my perspective. But in terms of the Adnan stuff, like he had a pretty good idea of what that relationship was. I mean, I will say he was like, why didn't you write about me like this? And I was like, because I'm married to you. I mean, we've been together for 17 years. Like, there are some things that are just as obvious as oxygen, you know, and I almost don't feel like I needed to write about that. And I have said, like, I'm not going to write anything about our marriage. Like that to me is off limits. I mean, that's not everything is copy, I think. So yeah, I will say, like, we've been kind of joking about like, well, if this were made into a movie, and he said like, so Adnan was very tall, and my husband is not blessed in that way, I would say. And it's sort of a joke. I mean, we're both pretty short people. And he said that the one thing he wants to make sure of is that the person who plays him is taller than the person who plays Adnan. So
that's so funny. Oh my gosh, men are hysterical. That's so funny. Height would never be a factor in the casting of myself in a movie, I have to say.
No, not ever. Not ever. No, I mean, I'm, 5, when my license says I'm 5'1", and that's a lie. So
okay. I'm 5'2". So, I get it. I can stand by that, I think, pretty confidently at this point. But, when I slump, which is always. So. Okay, so back to the Vows part of the book, which was super, totally interesting. Also, in addition to watching your love life unfold and, Anyway, let's go back to what it was like, because you paint such a great picture of like arriving in New York and, how your editor was suddenly like the most important person, like this guy sitting next to you who's like all of a sudden in people's worlds, like he becomes the guy for a short period of time. And then of course they get married, move on and like kind of forget about him. Right.
Yeah. Oh, totally. 100%. It's hysterical because like the guy who Ira is based on, I mean, he's no longer with the Times. He's retired for health reasons. And he is just the loveliest man. And when you talk to him, he's just very, what's the word? Almost courtly, I would say, in his like, in this presentation of himself and the way he talks to people. But I would say, not speaking for him, but I would say he absolutely knew his power and like knew the sway that he held. And it was funny, like seeing this dichotomy of this like guy who's not necessarily shy and retiring. I would never call him that, but it was almost like a Jekyll and a Hyde, like he was this very kind of quiet guy. And then like he would deal with these couples who were really demanding, or they could be really demanding. They could also just be lovely and just be cool and just be so thrilled to be in the Times in the first place. But like there were people who not only saw being in the Times as a privilege, but they saw it as their right. Like they thought it was something that like, of course, that would be part of their life's trajectory. Like, why would that not be a thing for them? Of course. And so it was very funny listening to him on the phone. And he also like, he went into the office, he came home. That was it. Like he didn't ever go to parties. He never made any, or as far as I knew, like he never made any like society appearances. He was like never out on the town. Like Bill Cunningham would never have caught him in a photo, but he still for like a very short period of time held a huge amount of power. And he totally reveled in it. And he's such a sweet man. Like, I feel like I'm kind of trash talking him.
No,
but like,
not at all. I can tell you have respect for him. It's interesting because you wrote about what it takes to kind of be a journalist and perhaps that kind of journalist in particular. But you said underneath it all, we are all weird. Weird precisely because of the personal cost and little glory of the profession, maybe. Weird because we live for other people's stories. Weird because we don't blink an eye at working when the rest of the world stops to react. Weird because we drive into storms instead of away from them. I loved that. That's such a great, that was just so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I feel like there's something about it, that there's like this instinct that you get if you want to report on the world instead of live it, but that you want to be that, you want to have that role in your lifetime.
100%. I mean, my husband is still a working journalist, and he also teaches at the University of North Carolina. So like he is very passionate about it. And I have stepped away from it and do something, and I'm a writer, not that kind of writer. Anyway, I'm not doing that. I'm not practicing journalism anymore, but that's still very much a part of our lives and our ethos and the way we're raising our kid. And, we've been talking about skepticism with her since she was about 3 years old. So I think that which is probably going to come around to bite us in the ass, but whatever. Anyway.
Well, I have a 6-year-old boy who might like to have that conversation with your 3-year-old girl in about like 30 years. Maybe they could go out and,
6 is hard.
They're all hard. It's all, anyway,
it's a different conversation, but I think we do feel like that. And I remember, and I think I wrote about this in the book, the first story I wrote, I went down to the medical school and interviewed this guy, David Wohl, he was working on the AIDS cocktail, and he's still there vaccinating people right now. Like he's in the paper and on the local news all the time. This is the same guy working to improve lives and help people, stay healthy. And I remember coming back from the medical school and like sitting down at this 1997 Mac or whatever, Apple to whatever it was, and thinking, this is amazing. This is amazing. Because you can ask almost any question you want, right? So like if you're naturally curious and if you're naturally nosy, it's a great thing to be a part of. But there is a mission to it. There is a sort of, I wouldn't say advocacy. I mean, that flies in the face of it all, and I wouldn't say activism, but there is the idea of upholding, public trust and facilitating a rigorous public conversation about whatever it is that may be happening. And the Times has a particularly, obviously vaunted perspective on that. And I never, when I read that first story, I never thought, I'm going to go work for the New York Times. I just thought, I'm going to do this. This is cool. And when I first saw my first byline, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. But there is a sort of driving into the storm aspect that I think I still have in my heart and probably will never get rid of.
Aww.
So
That's great. I love it. Well, we need that in society. People going in as everybody runs away. So I think what also you're saying about people's stories fits so well into this vows obsession, right? Because I was trying to analyze, why did I read them all the time? Like, I looked forward to Sunday. I would like grab that section and like race over and pour over every listing. And I remember thinking, like, every one, I'd be like, well, these guys aren't going to make it. Or, yeah, like, I think these guys, yeah, like, look at this mom and mother-in-law situation. This is not going to work. I can already tell, there were like so many warning signs just in the facts, I feel like,
Totally.
Right? There should have been some sort of black market, like, predictor for which vows things made it and which didn't. Actually, there probably is somewhere, but maybe I don't want to know about it.
Betfair's on it.
Yeah.
Well, Gawker did that thing, they scored the nuptials that I wrote about. And sometimes they would say, like, these people are not going to make it. Like, there's just no way on earth. I mean, I forget what their criteria was or were, but I mean, yes, I used to do the same thing. I mean, you talk to these people and you hang up the phone and be like, yeah, no.
No. But it's also the stories, like, and I think that's why, and maybe it's because I'm getting older, that I've started not pouring over vows as much as I do the obits, right? Like, because now that's what I like to read the most. I know that sounds ridiculous. I mean, I like to read all.
No, it's not.
Right? It's just because what it is, it's just a glimpse at a life. And it's a story. It's a story in 2 paragraphs that it would take a whole book to read. And you can just like imagine, like, what if, or what happened, or who is this person? And I don't know. It's just like, what do you think?
I mean, I always said that if I could get my dream job at the New York Times, it would either be to be the weddings editor. I think with this book, I'm never getting my dream job at the Times, but this is fine. It's fine. It would either, I think we're done. I would either be the weddings editor or the obits editor. And it's because those are 2, again, pens in the maps of people's lives. And I always thought that the people who got to write obits, it was even if it was for somebody like Idi Amin, or some tin pot dictator, it would still be an honor to be able to trace this person's life and to be able to do it in a way that was multifaceted and really held them up to the world. And I mean, your wedding and vows column announcement, whatever, that's a special day, right? But your death is a special day too. And I think that we tell these stories to put it in the record, to honor these people, to showcase them for who they really are. And I think that that's the truth for both vows columns and obits. And, I think I love reading profiles of people who have done cool stuff. I love reading profiles of people who are trying to change the world, however they feel that it needs to be changed. And I love that because, I don't know, just digging deep into a person is so important, And I think that it's good to show everybody that here is when my life, I mean, obviously all lives matter, but here's a point in my life when that really mattered, and here's a point in my life where I could say I did this. And here's a point in my life when I cared about this. And yeah, I agree. I love reading the obits too. And also like some of the obit writers like Margot Fox, they're amazing too. And those obits are chosen just as judiciously as, even more so, because more people die than get married every week, even more so than the vows columns. And so I totally agree. And especially now over the past 14 months, the way that they have treated the obits, as you well know, have been, I think, with such care. It made me think of, remember after September 11th, they did the, people we've lost.
Profiles. Yep.
Yeah. Profiles. Yeah.
Profiles in Terror or something. I bought that book. They came out with a book after of all the, anyway, I have it here somewhere. But.
Yeah. And like, do you remember the Vanity Fair portrait of like the team that did the September 11th profiles? Like they did the coverage and it was a picture of like the Metro editor. It was not funny, haha, but it was so like important and somber. And I think like Annie Leibovitz shot it and it was like at the Metro desk. And I just remember looking at this portrait and knowing most of the faces behind those and just thinking about what they had to go through to write those portraits. And I think a portrait of a person, no matter what point they're at in their lives, is so valuable. And so that's one reason I valued writing the vows columns and writing the wedding announcements so much, even though it was also wildly entertaining.
Yeah. Which thank you for sprinkling into the book too. That was really fun. So what's your overall takeaway on marriage after this whole book in like a sentence or two? Because like I keep hearing from younger people now that I'm in my 40s that like marriage is just like not even such a thing. Like they're like, why get married? Like they're just like, it gets great. We live together or we don't and whatever. And I don't know, why do it? And so is that where the world is going?
Oh my God. I had a conversation about this on Friday and like, I wish I had a clear answer, but I hear the same thing. You know, when I was teaching at UNC, I would bring it up to my students, and these are obviously like 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. But when I was 21 years old, finishing up college, like the MRS degree was a thing. I mean, people would like meet in college, you know, move to DC, like work a couple of years and get married, or move to New York, or, you know, whatever. Like there would be this sort of trajectory, right? And like, this is not even a thing. Like I was talking to one of my husband's former students who became our nanny, and she was like, I'm not getting married ever, ever. And I was like, okay, cool. So whatever. I'm just curious. I'm not judging. I'm just curious.
Yep.
But I mean, we went through this a lot. Like we were my husband and I were together 6 years before we got married. And we obviously had, as documented in the book, we had a lot of anxiety about making that, you know, going into the final frontier or whatever. But we decided we wanted to do it because we wanted to stand up in front of the people that mattered most to us, you know, our family, our friend, you know, whatever, and say like, this is the person I choose. Because I think that you need a community to help a marriage keep going. You know, like you need your friends, like your spouse needs their friends, you need your family. And sometimes you don't need your mother-in-law, but that's neither here nor there. But most of the time you you need these support pillars around you to help. I don't know, just as it takes a village to raise a child, I think it takes a community to help maintain a marriage or help maintain a relationship. And you can do that obviously without standing up in front of, you know, a priest or a rabbi or justice of peace or whatever. But I think that it's still a really good thing to have those markers in your life of like, this is the day that I stood up and said yes to this. And that's the value I see in a wedding anyway. And a marriage, I mean, you can't have a wedding without, well, you actually can have a wedding without a marriage, but a successful wedding, you know, usually culminates in a marriage. And, you know, I don't know, I should be more coherent about this since we just celebrated, you know, 11 years. But I get to wake up next to this person most days and think, this is what I'm going to do today. And as you know, the past year or so has really tested everything. It's tested the bonds of spouses and parents and children and friends and all of these things. And, you know, I think my relationship with my child has gotten a lot more challenging over the past year, but my relationship with my husband has become even more solid, I think, than it had been, just because like I had this teammate. And again, you can do that without a wedding. You can do that without a marriage. But for me, and I think I'm guessing for you too, and for a lot of maybe women in our cohort or our age group, that is just, it feels like bedrock.
I agree.
You know?
Yeah, no, I'm divorced and I got remarried as quickly as I could. I know everyone's like, why? I'm like, I just, because I have to. Also, it's like, I don't know. It felt to me, at least, like it wasn't like, I wanted people to take it as seriously as I felt about it in a way, right? Like, anyway. Yeah. Okay. So what advice would you have? I barely even talked about your writing, but because I could talk to you about this other stuff for so long. I feel like we're only scratching the surface, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What advice would you have to aspiring authors?
Oh, golly. Get a good group of writers. Okay. Let me backtrack. Women writers. I would say get a good group of women writers around you who have no problem with kicking your ass and being like, did you write today? What did you do? What did you do? What are you doing? What are you doing? When are you going to do it? And I don't mean that in like a jerky way, but I mean that you need that. Just as a marriage needs community, I think a writer needs community as well. So that's one thing. And number two, I mean, I feel particularly sort of vulnerable right now because I'm trying to work on a second book. And I think many first-time writers think the second book is never going to happen. But also many people who have never written a book think their first book is never going to happen. And so I think that you just have to have faith in yourself, as trite as that sounds, because that's one of the hardest things to do. But I think a community will help you do that. And the other thing is everybody says read, yes, of course, but like go be quiet. Especially this year, it's been so hard to find time for quiet, especially if you have children. You're trying to do this and juggling 7,000 different things. Like the quiet of the mind is so vital to this, as you well know. And having that space to do that is so, it feels like a privilege at this point. And so being able to find the quiet of the mind, I think, is one of the most important things. I say that like I wrote this book while working full time, juggling a child, dealing with a husband who had gotten laid off from, like there was just all of this stuff coming on. So I don't know if I can necessarily practice what I preach, but going forward, I hope to. But I will say that I could not have written this book without a supporting community of like loving women, honestly.
That's amazing.
So.
Well, Cate, thank you. It was so nice to chat. I want to like continue this because that was too short, but I loved your book. I love the title. I just love everything. It's just awesome. And just like how out there you are. I just loved it. Like from everything from you're saying, like, let's just say like that we're hot women when we're 24 years old or whatever. So like you're totally like unobscured sort of like hot sex relationship. I was just in the whole and all the intellectual stuff too. But it was just great. Totally loved it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That is so kind of you. I really appreciate this. It feels very weird to be sort of so out there, but I can't take it back now.
Nope,
so
don't.
Here we
go.
Those
are the best parts. The parts you're afraid to put out there. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Take care. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.